Hello, and welcome to Wintering Well. I am Shayla Herndon Edmonds. I'm the founder and chief creative officer of Oh My Goodness Wellness Bar, and I'm excited to invite you to make butternut squash soup with me today. So, earlier I recorded a video making my infamous and favorite hot wassail soup that can be enjoyed as a cocktail or a mocktail that's also family friendly and kid friendly. So you'll see an endorsement from my youngest child, Miles, at the end of that video. If you haven't checked it out yet, I encourage you to do so. But back to the task at hand. We're making butternut squash soup. It's one of my favorite soups because I love butternut squash soup, but it's also my favorite because I use butternut squash that's grown in my garden to create this, as well as the rosemary, as well as the sage and some of the other ingredients that we're using today. So it always feels a little extra special when I'm able to use things that I grow myself, which is something that's really important to me. It's a way of honoring my grandparents and my ancestry, but I grew up as a young girl in Southern Virginia who helped in the garden, and even though I may not have enjoyed it at the time, it is one of my favorite pastimes now, and it's one of the ways that I get to remember my grandparents. But it also reminds me of the winter. So butternut squash, some folks call it winter squash. You harvest it during the summer, and it literally lasts well into the winter. So today I'm going to be making a big batch, which means that you should follow the recipe that is in OMG's magazine, Journey by OMG, or on our website, so that you don't make too much or feel like you need to go and get 15 butternut squash. I'm using the yield from my garden because this time of year I can make batches that will be able to freeze and thaw out. So don't worry about my quantity. Follow the recipe that's in Journey by OMG, which also we're really excited to bring to you. So thank you for being a part of our launch. As we're thinking about wintering well, when I think about wintering well, I'm thinking about good food, taking the time to slow down, savor life, savor just time with family and friends. And so a good soup to enjoy and slurp a little bit is right up my alley. So to do this, obviously we're gonna need some butternut squash. So I've got that. I've already started to chop up one and set the seeds aside. You can actually set the seeds aside and roast them if you want something a little crunchy on top or just add some flavor. You're also gonna need sage, rosemary, garlic, ginger, and yellow onions. So I'm going to wash up all the ingredients, chop them up. Remember that we're going to be blending it, so it doesn't really matter how large you chop up your pieces. We're going to run them through the blender once they have softened. So I'll meet you back here in just a minute with my veggies all washed and chopped so we can get ready for step 2, which is to start cooking. Thanks for being here. I'll see you in a few. All right, so let's cook. So I have my soup pot out. I've already started to melt some butter. I'm gonna add a little grapeseed oil to the pan, but you can use whatever base you prefer. So if butter is a no-fly zone for you, I like a little butter in my butternut squash soup, but the goal is to let that start to warm up. I have my onions, garlic, ginger, rosemary, and sage already chopped up, and I have my butternut squash chopped up. Now, I am making a pretty big batch, but I have a confession. It's not gonna be all of my squash. As you can see, I have a lot of squash left. And so my hands got tired, and when I looked at this bad boy, I just decided that, yeah, we'll make maybe 2 more batches before the winter is over so that I can use the remaining squash that I have. So once our butter has melted, we'll start by adding our onions and sauteing them for a bit. I'm using 1.5 onions because of the amount that I'm making, but your recipe in the magazine and on the website calls for less if you're making a smaller batch. So also you can improvise however you need to. So I can't remember the first time I made butternut squash soup. I think I had the Panera kind and I really like it, but usually when I go somewhere and I love what I eat, my brain turns to how could I make that for myself? And yes, my earbud just fell out. So hopefully there's still sound and my beats automatically switch to the other ear, but we're gonna keep going. So bringing in our onions, I'm gonna let them saute for a bit, and then we will add in our squash, our garlic, and our ginger. And we'll continue to build from there. Make sure you've got some nutmeg and some salt for seasoning if you choose to do that. And
The recipe calls for vegetable stock. I'm actually going to be using a bouillon base to create my stock, but we'll get there a little later. So just reminding you, if you don't have that ingredient, maybe think about how you're going to create your base. All right, I'll be back in a few. All right, so let's keep going. So I sauteed my onions for about 4 minutes, so they are just at that point where they're, in a couple minutes they'll be translucent. So we're gonna go ahead and add our garlic, our butternut squash, and our ginger. So it's about to smell even more amazing. I love the smell of sauteed onions, but you add in some garlic and ginger. Yes, yes, yes. All right, so now move this big old container of butternut squash so we can start to saute it. Now, sometimes I actually just split my butternut squash in half, remove the seeds, and roast the squash in the oven. So you could, if you prefer, a more hands-off way of making this dish, you could opt to do that with your butternut squash. So we just need to make sure that you, I like to layer the pan with some foil and make sure I put some oil on the outside of the butternut squash, and you want to put it the flat side down and let it roast on 350 for a while. And then when it softens, you can go from there. I've done it before where I, took it out of the oven and transferred it to the blender so I could get it smooth, and then put it in the pot and started adding everything else. Today I just wanted to do something different and actually saute the butternut squash on the stove top. So that's what we're doing today. My earbud keeps fussing with me, but we're gonna keep going. And it looks great. I hope it smells great on your end. If you are making this with me, it's definitely one of my favorites. And also, just with what we have right now, if you didn't want to make soup, you could chop this up a bit more finely, season it well, and it's actually just a great side with the ingredients that we put in so far. So we're gonna let that cook for a bit. We're gonna keep an eye on it because this particular eye on the stove definitely holds heat, so I don't want anything to burn. So we'll let this sit for a few minutes, probably about 8 minutes, and then we will come back. We're back. So this has been simmering for a while, and it's really starting to soften. So I told you earlier that I'm using, our next step is to add our stock and also the rosemary and sage. If you already put your rosemary and sage in, that just means you're gonna get the flavors popping before I do, because I should have done it the last step, but it is what it is. So I am adding several pieces of bouillon. I'm using the chicken version. I'm going to add in my rosemary and sage. I may add a little bit more later once I have my first taste test. And then I'm going to add some salt. And yes, I eyeball. Sometimes I measure, but I grew up in the kitchen with my grandma. She just had a way of looking at things and knowing that that was enough. And then I'm gonna add in my water. Couldn't find my measuring cup that was large enough, so for me, I do 1 cup of water, or maybe a little less per bouillon cube. Put in a little less, just helps the flavor to be more rich. And of course, if you prefer to use vegetable stock or some other base, that is fine too. I'm gonna turn this up a bit. I had cut it back so that it wouldn't simmer too much. So I'm going to get it up to a simmer and let it simmer with the lid on for a bit, and then get ready to put it in the blender so it can all come together. This is looking great. Hope yours is looking good on your end. We're making butternut squash soup. So I have a challenge for you. While you're waiting for your butternut squash to simmer over the next couple minutes, I want you to focus on what you're grateful for. So what are 3 things that you're grateful for today, or as you think about this season? I believe that gratitude is one of the most powerful tools and abilities or skills that we have, but sometimes we're focusing on so much of what we haven't done, what's still on our to-do list, or we're projecting into the future, which brings worry, or we're thinking about the past, which can bring shame and sometimes depression and regret. But when we're focusing on what we're grateful for, we're right here in the present. So I am grateful that while I am making this butternut squash and talking to you all, that I'm simultaneously helping my 9-year-old with his homework. He has helped me with my videos. He participated in the last video, but I've also been able to step away while the pot has been simmering to help him with his homework. And he's doing such a great job. If you're a parent, you know that sometimes homework with the littles can be the struggle or can be a struggle. But tonight it's been wonderful, and I'm proud of him because he's trying some new things. And I'm proud that as a mom, I could do two things at once and do a pretty good job. Not that I'm advocating for multitasking, but sometimes we must. So that's one thing I'm grateful for. Think about what you're grateful for, and I would love it if you would comment in the chat. We'll be back soon. So we are back. It is time for us to blend our soup. So I've already got the Vitamix out. I'm gonna slide the unit out so that we can blend little by little. So I mentioned something earlier. I think I said to remember your nutmeg. I don't know why I said that. I'm not making the recipe, the butternut squash recipe that calls for nutmeg today. Today I chose to do the rosemary and sage together, which is a different, slightly different flavor profile. So if you're wondering why you haven't seen me put nutmeg in, it's because I don't know why I said that. Or more accurately, I got things mixed up. So I'm gonna take a sip of my Wassail Punch that I made earlier. If you haven't checked out the video for that, I highly recommend it. I'm gonna turn this back so it's not bubbling while I am transferring. Let's get this party started. So essentially what you're going to do, actually let me stir this up before I do that. First things first. So what we're going to do is sort of cup by cup or a few cups at a time, transfer soup into the Vitamix and blend so that we can smooth this baby out and get the consistency that you desire. If you like a little chunkiness, you can hold off on, just a little bit of the butternut squash so that you still have a bit of some chunkiness left. I like a kind of smooth consistency, so I'm going to blend all of it. If as you blend you feel like it's too thick, you can add more stock to yours, or whatever you need to do. So don't worry if you feel like it's not coming out right. The beautiful thing about making soup is that it is forgiving. So whether it's adding a pinch more salt or a little bit more rosemary and just letting it simmer for a while, it's all good. So I'm gonna blend this first batch. You don't want to hear that. I'll be back once I've got it all smoothed out. All right, so after many batches, because I lost count, I have finished blending the soup. It looks and smells amazing. I hope that yours is turning out good too. So I'm just gonna scrape all that goodness. One of the things I love about a Vitamix is that you could actually just make the soup in here once you've got your squash warm or soft. You could add your stock and everything here, depending on how much you're making. And since the Vitamix eats, the longer that it mixes, it could be a little one-stop shop type deal. But I like to keep it in a pot. That's just me. But I'm going to stir this up real good to make sure that I'm blending my batches. I have my spoon out for my taste test. One thing I love about butternut squash soup is that you don't have to add anything to make it creamy. I mean, you can if you want to. So if you want to make it creamy, maybe adding some coconut milk or some half and half, but it really doesn't need that. Like it just has a really nice consistency on its own. So I'm going to do my first taste test and we'll see what, if anything, it needs. Let me step a little closer. Have some. Okay. We did that. No modifications requested. Oh, that's good. That makes me happy. It is like 9:20 at this point, and it's been a long day, but I'm happy. Because it's been a great day too, but also this is gonna be my lunch for tomorrow. So I don't have to think about what lunch is. I can be excited because I know what it is, and that is gonna be yummy. So I hope that if you've been cooking along with me, that you are as excited about your soup and how it has come along as I am. Thank you for cooking with me, and I look forward to sharing more with you about how to winter well. These recipes that we've provided this time, the wassail, the hot wassail punch that can be used as like a cocktail or just a warm and comfy tea to close out a day or to spruce up your holiday function. Uh, Pulling mine back out, I've had it on the warmer on the back of the stove, so it's still warm for me to finish off before I go to bed. But yeah, it's so good. I couldn't resist. But you have the recipe for that. I love to see what you do with it. So make sure you tag at OMG Wellness Bar on Instagram, TikTok, or Facebook to share with us what you have, how you've made these recipes your own. Or if you already have your own, just share with us a picture or a recipe so that we can learn how you're wintering well. As we move through this season, please take good care of yourself. I know that there are so many things that we could be worried about, so many things that we are distracted by right now. Lots of feelings and emotions running high. Many of us worried about our future. But one way that you can winter well is by, quite frankly, eating well. Whether it's using everything that you have in your garden or going through your freezer and just thinking, what can I make that just makes my soul feel good? You know, they're just those things you eat that make you just feel good. And maybe it's the country girl in me because I was raised by, my grandmother and my mom and women in particular who could cook really well, but they could heal you through their food. The soup wasn't just soup. Create moments like that for yourself this year as you're wintering well. Make sure that you check out the rest of Journey by OMG and our website and follow us on social media so that you're exploring and learning about other ways to winter well. Learning both through what Curtis and I have to share, but some of the amazing people that we're partnering with as well. Thank you so much for being a part of our community, for trusting us with your care, and we love you. Here's to wintering well. Good night.